story time on how/why I slept 3 feet away from my dead neighbor for 6 to 8 weeks during quarantine. Just giving a trigger warning, this story is kind of gross. It was May of 2020 and the pandemic was definitely hitting a peak. Everyone had been at home at this point for the past 2 months and everyone was kind of going crazy, including myself. I lived alone at the time in a 250 square foot studio apartment that was very small in Los Angeles in the Valley. To give perspective for the rest of the story, my building is kind of like an old motel style, so all of our doors open outside, and the building is a rectangle with my door being the only one on the end of the rectangle and 2 doors on either side of me. It was around the middle of May and I started to call my mom and tell her that I wasn't really feeling like myself. What I meant by that was that I was having headaches, I wasn't really sleeping through the night, I was feeling nauseous a lot, and honestly, we all kind of wrote it off as me just feeling a little lonely and going a little crazy during quarantine, just like everyone else was. It was really unlike me to not be able to sleep through the night, so I thought this was really strange, but again, I just kind of wrote it off because I just thought I was really sad and depressed. Throughout the month of May, I noticed that I had an uptick in the amount of bugs in my apartment, which was very unusual because I'm extremely tidy and there's never bugs, but I noticed there was a couple spiders here or there throughout the month, but again, I didn't really think much of it because it was really hot, it was the middle of summer, and sometimes this happens. I started complaining to my manager that I was really sick of the spiders and I needed her to come, but she said she didn't really want to send anyone because it was the pandemic and it wasn't an emergency and it wasn't like I had a million of them, it was only 2 or 3. Towards the middle of May, I started to complain about a bad smell that I would get whenever there was a heavy breeze, but again, it wasn't anything I could really put my finger on, it was just something that I was smelling occasionally. Truthfully, my best description of this smell was kind of like a dead fish, so I thought that maybe a bird had caught a fish, which in retrospect is the most stupid thing ever because there's no lakes anywhere near me. I started to feel really crazy because, again, I wasn't sleeping, the smell was really starting to bother me, and this was going on for weeks, but my manager was refusing to send anyone out or come out herself because of the pandemic. I started thinking maybe my schizophrenic neighbor who lived to the right of me had his dog had died or something had happened and I got really worried. But my manager told me she can't just start knocking on neighbors' doors and bothering them, but I had this really bad feeling that something was super wrong and the smell was getting really bad every time it was windy and I was really, really worried. But remember, it's the middle of the pandemic and we had been home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so I think I had gotten kind of used to the smell. I called over my boyfriend, he came, and I was super nervous to have him over because of obviously COVID, but he agreed the smell was horrific, he could barely handle it, and then after staying with me for a week, he started to not be able to sleep through the night, he was feeling nauseous and all the same symptoms as me. This is when I started to think something's really wrong. Because my manager said she wouldn't come out, I decided to tell her I was going to call police non-emergency, so they came out and did a wellness check on the neighbor that lived to the right of me who was schizophrenic. Turns out he was perfectly fine and everything was okay. My manager was pretty upset with me because I was disturbing my neighbors and then they gave me a notice saying that I can't be harassing people in the building. I consulted the police and they told me after 48 hours if my manager didn't convene, then I could call them again. And this is when things got crazy. I felt like I was on a mission because no one was listening to me and my manager was making me out to feel crazy. This is part 2 of how/why I slept 3 feet away from my dead neighbor for 6 to 8 weeks during quarantine. I'm going to give another trigger warning for just grossness overall. Okay, so where we left off was the end of May, and this was the peak of the pandemic, as I mentioned, and this was around the time of George Floyd, which, if you know, in Los Angeles was a very crazy time. There was tanks on the street outside my apartment. It was very hectic, and honestly, me complaining about a smell and some spiders was the last of anyone's concerns, especially the police. I had already called the police once, and they had told me that within 48 hours, if nothing had been done or my manager didn't get involved, then I can call them again, and they would escalate the situation. But honestly, it was the last of anyone's concerns. So my manager was quite upset with me for harassing my one neighbor, but I had told her she needed to get involved, and honestly, she wasn't really having it. She agreed to send out our maintenance man to meet me at Wednesday around 3 p.m., but of course, Wednesday at 3 p.m. rolled around and my maintenance man was nowhere to be seen. I decided to give it a couple hours, and sure enough, he showed up, and within minutes of showing up to the building, he had walked up the stairs because I was on the 2nd floor, and remember, our building's a rectangle, my unit is at the end, there's 2 doors on either side of me and stairs that go straight up. He had walked up the stairs, he couldn't even make it up the stairs without starting to vomit. He ripped off his mask and he said, "I am going to get the master key, someone is dead." I immediately start freaking out because I felt so validated after weeks and weeks of feeling crazy and complaining and no one believing me. My manager stops answering her phone, the maintenance man literally disappears and never comes back, so I decide I'm calling the police. Things went from 0 to 100 really fast, and honestly I was the prime suspect in all of this because I'd been the only one who was complaining the entire time about this situation. I shouldn't say I was a suspect, I was mostly just the main point of contact for this situation. Within a few minutes, there was 8 cops that were all inside my apartment gathering information, and they said they were just going to start busting down doors. The logical answer was to start with my neighbor who lived to the left of me because we already talked to the neighbor who lived on the right of me, and this is when the most disgusting, craziest thing happened. So the cops gather the information they need from me, and they decide to start with logically the neighbor on the left since they already talked to the neighbor on the right, and they say there's 6 cops, they all have their guns drawn, and they say, okay, LAPD, exit with your hands raised in the air, you've got 30 seconds, we're going to start counting down. Right before the end of the 30 seconds, one of the cops says, "Hey, let's draw down our guns. Did anybody just try to open the door and see if it's unlocked?" And I was like, why would it be unlocked? Brace yourself. So the cop twists the doorknob and he opens it maybe an inch. The amount of bugs that came out of this unit, it looked like 1,000 bugs, thousands of them, flying out of the unit. They immediately slammed the door and the cops called for a ton of backup. The cops started ripping off their masks and multiple of them were throwing up over the side of the railing. I slammed my door and they told me to stay inside and don't come out. Long story short, they said this was the worst decomposed body they had ever come across and they see a lot of decomposed bodies. Not going to go too into the specifics of it, especially for the privacy of the person, but let's just say they were liquefied and they were basically a skeleton at this point. All the symptoms my boyfriend and I were experiencing were simply because of the fumes and toxins that were releasing from the body and natural gases that were making me extremely sick during pretty much all of quarantine. And that is the story of how I slept 3 feet away from my dead neighbor.
Am I the asshole for cutting my hair so my sister had a longer punishment? This technically happened around 7 years ago, but after newly revealed information, things are tense. Back when I was 17, my younger sister Ellie thought it would be a fun prank to cut my hair in my sleep. I'm a bit of a mover and active dreamer, so when I suddenly jolted, my sister panicked and ended up cutting off a much longer chunk than what she wanted. Out of instinct, my sister let out a scream, so I woke up and saw what she did. My parents woke up to me yelling at her and in turn yelled at her too. My mom took me to the hairdresser and I ended up going from having my hair halfway down my back to a pixie cut. As punishment, my sister had to use some of her savings to pay for my new hairstyle and then gave my sister a choice to either get a buzz cut or no phone and no social life until my hair got longer. Let me be clear when I say until my hair got longer. I don't mean that until it's back to its original length, but rather long enough so that growth was noticeable. My hair usually doesn't take too long to grow, so my sister chose the second punishment as she didn't want to lose her hair. That just made me all the more furious, so out of vengeance, I would give myself little trims at night in the bathroom every once in a while to make it seem like my hair wasn't growing. Eventually, my sister got tired of waiting and missed hanging out with her friends outside of school and asked for some other type of punishment. Our dad reminded her of her option, but it still had been months and my sister felt like it wasn't fair because she didn't intend to cut as much as she did and that she apologized and insisted that while my hair could grow back, she could never get back time that she missed enjoying her teen years. My sister would cry and pout but refused to shave her head to get back her privileges. Over time, I got over wanting revenge and just let my hair grow and my sister was ecstatic to getting off the punishment. Years went by and we never spoke about it again until we had a conversation with our cousins talking about the worst thing we've done to our siblings. My sister brought up the haircut and I casually mentioned how I got back at her. I didn't think it was a big deal anymore, but my sister got upset and later texted me calling me an ass. Am I the asshole for waxing my 5-year-old daughter's unibrow? So my 5-year-old has a pretty thick, dark unibrow that is very noticeable. Because of COVID, her preschool was online, therefore she was never bullied for having it. However, this past summer, her cousins came over to visit and many of them teased her for her unibrow. They'd call her countless names, and at just 5 years old, my daughter already thinks she is ugly. It breaks my heart because nobody, let alone a 5-year-old, should think they are ugly. I reassure my daughter she's beautiful and not to listen to her cousins, but my daughter still believes she is ugly. In a week, she is starting kindergarten and I really do not want the bullying to get worse there. So yesterday, I took it in my hands to wax her unibrow. I didn't shape them or anything, just waxed the middle off to get rid of her unibrow. My daughter was elated, looking in the mirror and calling herself so pretty. It warmed my heart to see her so confident in herself, but I made sure to remind her she was beautiful both ways. When my husband came home, my daughter was so excited to show him her eyebrows. In front of her, he called her beautiful, but after she left, we had a huge fight. He said it was horrible of me to be subjecting my 5-year-old daughter to beauty standards. And at such a young age, I'm pushing it on her instead of telling her she is beautiful the way she is. And no 5-year-old should be waxing their eyebrows, and I'm pushing the mentality that she's only beautiful without her unibrow. And that my daughter is too young to know what she even wants, and she should have been able to make her decision to wax it off when she is old enough. I truly understand all the points he has made. However, my daughter has told me she wants to get rid of her unibrow, and I didn't want her to grow up with the bullying and teasing and blame me because I could have prevented it. Am I the asshole for not letting my best friend have her wedding on my property after being uninvited? One of my 29-year-old male best friend Carla, 31-year-old female, is getting married soon. It's only meant to be a small backyard type of wedding, but they've been planning it for a few months now, and originally it was supposed to be on my property. They wanted it because it's private, has lots of open space for their reception, a nice view, and the house could be used for them to get ready and stuff. Of course I said yes. She and her fiance Rick were very happy. The thing is, Carla and I do have a history. We went out on and off in college but decided to stay friends. Then I met my wife, we got married, and Carla met Rick, and now here they are. Now my wife knows I went out with Carla back in college and she didn't care. Carla still went to our wedding and everything. I never knew if Rick was told or not. It's not my relationship, therefore not my business to say anything, so I never did. Rick found out recently and not in the best way. Not sure how, but from what I heard from friends is that one mutual friend told him no idea why we used to date. Not only that, but apparently Carla said a couple of years ago she was still in love with me when she was already dating Rick. I don't have actual confirmation if that's exactly what he was told. All Carla's told me is that Rick was told about our past and he's angry at her for never saying anything. It became quite the drama and I didn't hear from her over a month until now. She told me they're still going to couples counseling and that the wedding is still on, but Rick requested that I not attend. It sucks, but I totally get why he wouldn't be comfortable. Then I asked the obvious question, where are they going to hold the wedding then? To my surprise, she said they still want to have it at our place. Rick said so too, and in my mind I'm going, he doesn't want the guy who dated his fiance years ago at the wedding, but still wants the wedding at his house. So my wife and I are expected to just not be at our house that weekend. I told Carla no, they're going to have to find someplace else since we're not going to simply leave our home to them for the weekend. Not only for safety reasons, but it just doesn't make sense. Rick doesn't want me around because he's not comfortable, but is comfortable enough to have their wedding at my house. They really want their wedding here though, and because of that, I've been bugged by not only her and Rick, but also some friends who think I'm being a petty asshole for not letting them have the wedding here anymore. Honestly, I don't think I am. It just doesn't make sense at all to have to leave our own place for a wedding we're no longer welcome to and leaving our home totally vulnerable. Still, I'm being accused of sabotaging their wedding, and Rick believes it's the least I can do after everything. Am I the asshole for wearing white at my blind cousin's wedding? I'd like to start by saying that me and my cousin, who was blind from birth, aren't very close, but we get along well as relatives. She sent me an invitation, though we don't talk as much, but since I wanted to take a break from work, I decided to go. My favorite color is white. I love wearing white because it brings out my skin glow and makes me feel comfortable and confident. I purchased a maxi white dress, nothing fancy, but goes well with my skin tone, and wore it to the wedding. There wasn't a big party with many guests, but sort of family dinner and small celebration. I really thought no one would even notice I was wearing white. My cousin and her husband obviously didn't know because no one told them. But my aunt kept giving me uncomfortable looks the entire evening, and so did my other cousin. Once I decided to leave, my aunt pulled me aside and berated me for wearing this color at her daughter's wedding. She said that just because her daughter is blind doesn't mean she's stupid and doesn't know what's going on around her, basically saying I brought negative energy and disturbed the celebration by having guests notice and by extension my cousins as well. She gave a lengthy lecture and asked if I hate to see her daughter happy and whether I pulled a stunt because my blind cousin got married before me. I was like, whoa, calm down, none of this was true. And married before me? I never thought of that. I just wore my favorite color and didn't do it because my cousin is blind and wouldn't notice. I argued with my aunt for trying to dictate what I wear, but she defended herself saying I was a guest and should have respected the bride. I left feeling very upset and exhausted from that encounter. My boyfriend said he believed I used the fact that my cousin is blind to wear white, but this didn't fly with her family. He pulled the "I told you so" line and said I just made my family hate me with that stunt. Even though he knows I always wear white, but he warned me that if my cousin finds out, there's going to be some issues. He suggested I get ready to apologize, but I really see no reason to apologize since I chose to wear a comfortable color that I feel confident in. So, am I the asshole for wearing white to her wedding?